The film begins on the set of Edward, a man with neurofibromatosis, which leaves his face disfigured by patches of skin. After instructions from the director and an awkward conversation with a colleague, Edward heads home on the subway, where he feels like everyone is looking at him. At home, he notices that a new neighbor is moving into the next apartment. The porters carrying her furniture accidentally scrape Edward's passage. And in the kitchen, he notices that something is dripping from the ceiling and puts a bowl under it. He then prepares dinner while listening to an instructional video on the art game. Edward is distracted by a call to the portal and, out of fear, accidentally cuts his hand with a knife. Outside, Ingrid, his new neighbor, wants to apologize for damaging the gate. Noticing Edward's wound, she invites him to help heal her, for which she brings a first aid kit from her apartment. Having bandaged her hand, the lady examines her neighbor's apartment, maintaining a friendly conversation with him, which is somewhat unusual for a shy person. A young woman notices a red typewriter and admits that she dreams of becoming a playwright. Edward visits a doctor who examines him for illness. At the end of the meeting, he talked about a new experimental treatment that could theoretically cure his facial growth. But since this is associated with certain risks, the doctor suggests that the patient think first. Returning home, Edward notices that the damaged hallway is painted a provocative bright red, and the paint stains lead to Ingrid's apartment. In the kitchen, the leak in the ceiling worsened, forcing him to stack even more dishes. He then moves into a neighbor's house to congratulate her on her new home and give her typewriter. The conversation is interrupted by the appearance of another person who came to visit the girl. While going down the stairs, Edward runs into his neighbor from apartment 4B, who is repulsed by his appearance. Edward goes to another audition, where in addition to him, there are many other candidates without visible physical disabilities. The only role he received in his entire acting career was a public service announcement designed to convince people to fight prejudice against people with non-standard appearance. Edward later points this out to Ingrid when she comes to visit. A young woman removes a speck from his face, which the young man, whose face no one except doctors has ever touched, interprets as a sign of sympathy. An awkward misunderstanding arises, after which the neighbor hurries to leave, promising to bring a special face cream later. After this incident, he decided to enroll in an experimental treatment program. At the clinic, he is examined, and the presence of spots on his face measured before the medicine is given. His cut is also treated with a knife. The nurse tries to suppress her disgust at the sight of him. While having lunch in the park, Edward enviously notices his neighbor from house 4B walking with a beauty. Walking past the living statue of Lincoln, he carefully examines the makeup animator, looking at his skin. The animator does not show that he is unpleasant, but when Edward leaves, he looks in his direction. At home, he finds gifts, earns them near the door, fabric softener, candy, the promise cream, and a note given to him, typed on a typewriter. While he is chewing candy in front of the TV, a piece of plaster and board falls from the leaky ceiling. Edward goes to bed, but in the middle of the night, there is a persistent knock on the gate. The homeowner and doctors are on the doorstep. They made a mistake in the apartment and are forced to go to House 4B to the hanged tenant. Edward and other spectators watch as it is filmed and notice an orphan cat. Later, he and the cat watch out the window as doctors load the corpse into a car. Edward and Ingrid go to a cafe to eat pizza and discuss what happened with their neighbor. Suddenly, a passerby knocks on the window and waves to Edward as if he were an old acquaintance. Having greeted him in return, the man admits that this happens to him sometimes. A passerby mistook him for someone else. Back home, he checks the ceiling for leaks when more pieces fall and land on his head. While wiping the blood from the blow in front of the mirror, Edward notices that a piece of skin simply comes off. He ends up in the hospital, where the doctor states that these are the consequences of experimental treatment. Edward receives a souvenir mask made on his face and an exact copy of it. Walking home along the street, ignoring the communication of the local crazy people, he begins to feel sick. Edward walks into a bar to throw up in the toilet before ordering a drink. Then, one of the visitors comes up to him and says that he has already seen him somewhere. Edward is in no mood to socialize as he feels nauseous and vomits right behind the counter. He returns home, where he sobs in bed, either from pain or from shame for the shame he experienced. Rubbing his face with his hand, he notices that the skin is peeling and peeling off like the skin of an onion. By morning, almost no trace of the previous growths remained, and the slightly tattered face of a World War II veteran looked back at him in the mirror. He watches Ingrid and her friend through the peephole and eats lunch while sitting on the floor. In general, he is having fun as best he can while the recovery process is underway. By the evening of the next day, not a trace remained of his former appearance. Having gotten used to this, Edward goes out and walks with a new person in a prosperous area where there is no risk of getting hurt. He returns to the same bar where he vomited earlier, orders a whiskey, and joins the group celebrating their favorite team's victory in the game. The pleasant evening ends in the toilet stall, where some lady does him a favor with ease. Returning home in the morning, Edward looks at himself in the mirror, then goes to bed in his clothes. But he is not allowed to sleep. A handyman knocks at the entrance to fix a hole in the ceiling. One of the doctors monitoring Edward enters through the open gate. He wonders why he hasn't come to the meeting in a week. Unrecognized by his new appearance, Edward declares that he committed suicide and introduces himself as Guy. Ingrid overhears their conversation. The story moves forward for a while. Guy moved into a new apartment and became a successful real estate agent. His face appears on advertising posters for the company he works for. One day, Guy notices Ingrid on the street and, succumbing to his emotions, follows her. A young woman walks into a small Broadway theater where she is auditioning for her first play, Edward. Noticing Guy, Ingrid mistakes him for another actor and offers to read the text. In the process, the man understands that the play is about the friendship of a woman with a man with physical disabilities. Ingrid wrote the script based on her friendship with him. He comes to the next examination with a mask left by the doctors as a souvenir, which is an exact copy of his face before removal. Struck by the looks and timid shyness that fit the character so perfectly, Ingrid casts Guy in the lead role, not knowing that he is the character on which she is based. Later, he and Guy go out for drinks at a bar and then go to Ingrid's to continue. Guy notices the red typewriter Ingrid gave him. Ingrid reports that she doesn't use it. She tries to seduce him, but the young man, according to the old habit of an experienced virgin, does not hesitate. Ingrid has to be persistent to get him in a bed and take his pants off. One day, during a regular rehearsal, Oswald, a man with neurofibromatosis who looks like Edward, enters the theater. He was advised to come to the casting, but seeing that the role had already been taken, Oswald politely said goodbye and left. Ingrid watches him for a long time and then asks Guy to wear a mask during intimacy. However, this face made her laugh, and that was the end of the debauchery. As Guy celebrates another successful deal at the bar with his fellow real estate agents, Oswald comes over to congratulate him. Colleagues are fascinated by the sociable man and, despite his appearance, offer him a drink. Guy is dissatisfied, seeing how easily and naturally Oswald gets along with people. It's like looking through a distorting mirror at your mother's friend's son. At the next rehearsal, Guy argues with Ingrid as they discuss the character. When Oswald appears again, Ingrid invites him to watch the rehearsal, after which the whole troupe goes to the bar. Oswald captivates the entire group, as Guy becomes increasingly depressed and looks like a pale shadow in comparison to his new friend. After talking with him, Ingrid spends the night rewriting the script, making changes under the influence of Oswald's charm. The next rehearsal takes place with makeup applied, but the makeup continues to fly off Guy's face as he emotionally reads the text. Returning home, he meets Oswald in the park, who friendly invites him for a drink. Sitting at the bar, it turns out that Oswald does not work anywhere, but lives off successful investments that he once made. Guy is surprised that his new friend knows beautiful girls, despite their appearance. He himself is too tense and complicated to make such acquaintances. In addition, Oswald is not at all shy about the stage and sings karaoke with pleasure. At this time, Guy examined the visitors, surprised that no one looked at his friend with disgust. Everyone is busy with their own affairs, and even laughs not at him, but at his own jokes. Soon, Ingrid makes the natural decision to give the main role to Oswald, leaving Guy for the finale. Metaphorical transformation, when the heroine looked at Edward with loving eyes and saw a handsome man in him. Guy reluctantly agrees. He doesn't have much of a choice anyway. The play with Oswald in the title role will premiere soon. After the performance, Guy sits offended on the sidelines while Ingrid and Oswald bask in the glory. The next day, he reads reviews in the newspaper, which also praise the performance of the leading actor. And then Ingrid announces that there is no need for him to appear on stage in the image of a transformed Edward, and therefore Guy is no longer in the production. Guy listens to all this with a stony expression on his face and the pain of betrayal in his heart. He later watches jealously as Oswald deprives him of his new happy life. Noticing that she is spending time in the park with some woman and her daughter, Guy rushes to Ingrid to open her eyes. Asphalt is betraying her. However, it turns out that this is Asphalt's ex-wife and his daughter, which the new passion knows very well. Maddened to the core, Guy goes to his old apartment and breaks the ceiling with a rag until the master appears. Then he sits on the floor all night, putting on a mask of his old face, reflecting on the vicissitudes of fate. He was never happy with his new appearance, and Asphalt gets along well with people even without treatment. Apparently, it's not a matter of appearance. Trying to sort out his feelings, Guy goes to work wearing a mask, faking his previous illness. He presents the apartment to potential buyers, but his appearance and habits frighten the girl and worry her parents. Gaia is then fired in disgrace. Sinking further into stress, he goes to the theater, where he disrupts the performance by running onto the stage wearing a mask and starting a fight with Asphalt. Although security attempts to remove the noisy spectator, the incident ends with the ceiling and light fixtures falling directly on Guy. In the next scene, Guy is all covered up and lives in Ingrid and Asphalt's apartment. He attends a dinner with actor Michael Shannon, where they discuss a potential film adaptation of the play. This is how the days go by. Guy lives with his ex-lover and her new boyfriend, who feels guilty for his injuries. When the bones healed and a period of physical therapy began, a special nurse was hired for him. But behind his employer's back, he makes negative comments about Asphalt's appearance, which enrages the traumatized Guy because he was like that himself. Guy takes advantage of the moment and attacks the medic with a knife, and then strangles him in a short fight. For murder, Guy is sent to prison, where he frowns, remains silent, reads books, plays basketball with his head, in general, does everything that a decent prisoner should. Years later, when his sentence has expired, Guy, having served time in prison, walks down the street where Asphalt spots him. He invites a laid-back old friend to a restaurant to celebrate his freedom. At the restaurant, Guy learns that he and Ingrid are still married, are engaged in creative work, and are planning to move to Canada. There is a community of cultists who practice nudism, free love, and drug use. Guy listens to them silently, and when the time comes to place an order, he simply cannot decide. Asphalt notes that the elderly comrade has not changed at all. The man looks at the camera and smiles. He himself understands that he remains the same weak-willed person he was before, and appearance has absolutely nothing to do with it. This is where the film ends.